Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Jacket Sports Weekly. In this episode, we're going to wrap up the regular season for both men's and women's wrestling. We looked at indoor track and field, in which major records were being broken and tied, which we'll be getting into a little bit later. But then also for basketball, it's the first time that both teams have won at home consecutively in a year. And then we'll also introduce a brand new segment, all that and more, here on Jacket Sports Weekly.
Welcome to Jacket Sports Weekly, Waynesburg University's weekly sports show where we cover the best of the best in athletics. Our analysts discuss a multitude of highlight plays such as touchdown passes.
And Barber's going to throw again, one-on-one. Does he got it in him? That's a catch! Tyler Richmond with flags thrown everywhere makes the catch! Touchdown, Waynesburg!
And ones.
This was low, Waynesburg's going to get it! Suggs is going to pull away here, go for the layup, and it's going to fall in and one! PJ Suggs!
And home runs.
Higgins drives one to left field. The left fielder running back, and that ball is out of here. Grace Higgins.
Join us every Wednesday to see what's new in Waynesburg University athletics.
Thank you for joining us here today on Jacket Sports Weekly. In today's episode, we're going to get started off with wrestling. I'm Joe Chirillo, your host for today's show. Joined with me up on the desk for men's and women's wrestling is Cole Keller. Cole, thank you very much for joining us up here today.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah. When we look into this is the regular season wrap-up practically. The women are practically done. They don't really have any planned events. They might be participating in some random events here and there, but most likely their season is over. With that, they finished 16 out of 28 teams at the Bobcat Open in Frostburg, Maryland. And then for the men's side, they were 13 of 13 in the John Suma Invitational at Baldwin Wallace. But there is one key highlight, which we will get to later. But with that, the season's kind of wrapped up for the women's. So the women's now, it's their second official season in the history books. As of right now, we now have, this was about an hour ago, the President's Athletic Conference did announce that the Women's Championship will be a thing coming into next season. So that's going to be a highlight to look forward to for them next year. But right now, there's no really hopes for any of that right now. So how would you just kind of explain the season and the history that it's going to impact for the women's team?
Well, like you said, Joe, I mean, the second season, it's really hard to build something in 2 years, especially something so new to Waynesburg. Granted, Greene County, Western Pennsylvania, huge wrestling area. It's probably the top tier wrestlers in the whole entire country, let alone probably the world. But whenever you're trying to build up something like that and you're struggling your first 2 years, I mean, you kind of just have to keep building it step by step. And the key for Waynesburg, as both wrestling programs, is they just need to have more people. They need to be able to fill out those lower weight classes. Whether these wrestlers are the Jesse Orbans of the world or the other wrestlers of the world, it doesn't matter. As long as you have somebody there to be able to practice with, you have two people at the same weight class so that they can train together, and then the better person is sharpening up the other person, and eventually iron sharpens iron. So no matter what, the wrestlers are going to get better, but you have to be able to recruit those people, get them in here.
And continue to do so. So for the women's side, again, their season is practically over. We won't be hearing from them much more for this season. But when we look over into the men's side, one of their big highlights was Jesse Orban achieved his 100th career win over this past weekend at the John Suma Invitational. And just run me through this victory and the overall success that Orban has been able to have here at Waynesburg.
Yeah, so looking into the John Suma Invitational, I mean, last year Orban did win it at 184 pounds, and it was expected for him to do it again, and he did just that, but this time at 174 pounds. Went 4-0, those 4 wins, pinned Alfred State College's Ronan Klug, followed by a very close match, his closest match of the day with Cole Porter from Baldwin and Wallace, pulled off an 11-9 decision, and then in the semis, 10-0 major decision over Johnny Beckett from Eastern University. And then championship time. Orban's coming for it. Matches up against Case Western's Chase Crutchley. Goes to distance. Very close match. Within the final seconds of the third period, match is almost over. Orban secures a takedown on Crutchley, wins the match 4-1, repeat as champion. I mean, it doesn't get more poetic than that.
Exactly. Can't get better than that. With that and his 4-0 against in the John Suma Invitational, and then 5-0 in this past week, that earned Jesse Orban the notch of President's Athletic Conference Male Wrestler of the Week. So with that, again, now Jesse Orban with this men's team, they're going to be traveling to Hiram for the PAC Wrestling Championships this weekend on February 14th. What does Waynesburg need to do to get themselves in a proper situation to maybe not finish last?
Well, when you look at it, Waynesburg dead last in the conference. I'm followed ahead of them, Hiram, and then ahead of them, Hiram, Bethany, Teal, St. Vincent, W&J are all tied 4-1 in the conference. So those are expected to be the top-heavy teams. The only outlier I can see happening is Orban. Orban's going to be able to compete for that 174-pound championship, expected to repeat as champions. But last year, W&J won the President's Athletic Conference championship. I don't think that's going to happen this year, simply because they've lost a lot of wrestlers. They lost a lot, and that's because of the transfer portal. They lost 2 of their best players to Roanoke University, and their wrestlers, I mean, they're still great, don't get me wrong. But they narrowly beat St. Vincent, only by 3 points, and then they lost to Teal big. So it's really kind of a toss-up, but I'm expecting Teal and St. Vincent to end up being that big championship match. And I expect Orban, like I said, to be the outlier and win, especially notching his 100th career win at Waynesburg this past weekend.
Going into it, so for, again, the championships will be at Hiram on this weekend, February 14th. And with that, most likely, for majority of the wrestlers, their season will be over. Jesse Orban could look into national or regional competitions. So we'll be talking about that a little bit more here on JSW in the coming weeks. But for the men's side, for those returning wrestlers, we already talked about what they need to do in the recruitment side of it. But for returning wrestlers, what do they need to do, especially those that have been injured frequently, have not been able to compete academically? What can they do to really be successful in this upcoming season as a team, but also as individuals like Orban?
Well, wrestling, it's just one-on-one. It's you and another person, and mentally, it's one of the most hardest sports to grasp, and you have to have a great mental state to be a great wrestler. So if you're looking at everything, you have to just, Waynesburg kind of lacking in the roster department. Okay, this is what I have. This is what I have. This is what I can use with it. So that's the mindset that I think that Waynesburg has to have going into next season. Coach, still brand new. We're still going to kind of see what is going to happen the following seasons. But Waynesburg ultimately is just trying to rebuild their wrestling program. COVID really struck them down hard. And that's happened to a lot of schools. But Waynesburg, in the wrestling department, that happened the worst to. And ultimately, you're trying to build those blocks back up to get to where you once were as President's Athletic Conference champions in wrestling. I mean, really, it just comes down to the fundamentals of everything. You have to train, you have to make sure that your cardio is good, and you have to make sure that you're taking care of your body very well.
Thank you very much for Cole for joining us here on Wrestling. That's going to do it all for this segment. Next, we're going to move over to track and field. Continuing here on Jacket Sports Weekly, we're going to go over into the indoor track and field. Joe Chirillo still with you for this entirety of the episode. And joined up here with me is Ethan Spozarski. We're going to be getting into the indoor track and field. A lot of history kind of being made in this event and for the weekend. So my first question to you, Ethan, is a lot of different program markers on this weekend for the men and women competitors in both the distance runners, in the throwers and jumpers, and everything across the board were marked. Does this spark of faster times and longer distances continue, and does it eventually catch fire later into this indoor season?
I think absolutely it plays a large factor in it because this team is now motivated. You're heavily more motivated because I think this is arguably the hottest start to track and field that I've seen in the last 4 years. I think a lot of people who pay attention to track and field could probably agree to that because there's constantly new notches, new success, new program markers that have been put in these first 3 meets. And I think it all starts here. 19 top 8 finishes for both the men's and women's. 37 personal bests were set, and 1 program record was tied, which, by the way, we'll get into that here a little bit. I know we're going to talk about it later. But to some of the top 8 finishers going down the board, it's not even just your heavy hitters. Ella Rochelle was involved in that, but you also have Jaleesa Fuller, Grace Tanksley, Erin Bleeville, Daniela Hawley, Ella Booth. Then you also have Gabrielle Chico, and then flipping over on the other side. I mean, Jagan Williams was put into that category. I mean, Kyle Casella, Noah Jones, Michael Wines, and their relay team were put into there. I mean, overall, and Jacob Parker as well, like, the top 8 finishes were just running all the way through, and Waynesburg was finding themselves having a very successful weekend, and I do think that's going to translate later into the season as they're reaching the midway point and the PAC championships coming up here in a few weeks, and that's going to do a lot of wonders for this team.
So you alluded to it a little bit earlier on 2 different markers that were made, both on the women and the men's side. Ella Rochelle being the one that set 200 and 400 meter indoor records last season. She continues to do that in this second season with her, as she just notched a second place in program history for the 400 meter time, and it was just behind her own personal time of the best. So in that, she also finished 5th in the long jump. So does this for her, is this past season just continuation of what's going on now? Or is this a brand new season for her and she can continue, maybe even break her own personal record in these next few meets?
I think that in the NCAA in track and field is the longest season of any collegiate sport. It's not even debatable. They start in September, they finish in May. It literally is the longest season continuous because indoor track and field is basically like the preseason. If you're comparing it to football terms, it's the preseason to the regular season for outdoor track and field. So here for Ella Rochelle, she's built herself a foundation, a block, if you will, to start on. And I think absolutely that it carries over. But at the same time, it's a new way for her because she's like, all right, old season, my best is now where I'm starting at, so I can get even better. And she's very much has the attitude and confidence towards it. Talking with her, she's very clear. She's not settling for anything. This isn't the tip of the iceberg for her. She's going to go past. She wants to break from second in program history to the fastest 400 meter time. And I mean, she already has a 1:02 mark to work with. So now you can push that through. And we're only 3 weeks into the indoor season. You have all of the outdoor season to do so too. That's a huge advantage for her. And I think looking forward as well, that also continues to carry on though for a lot of other athletes on the track and field team.
Moving over into the men's side of it, you have Jacob Parker that last year continued to make waves in shot put, and he's continuing to do so early on. In this side, he now has, out of the top 10 longest distances in shot put, he now has 8 of those after his throw from this season tied his long from last season of 15.17 meters. That is tied for first in the program. So for this, is this a product of what he built up last season? And is this going to continue, or is this just where he's going to max out?
No, he ain't maxing out here. I think it's pretty clear. I mean, you have 7 of the top 10 finishes, including the second place one. And by the way, I'm honestly more impressed that he tied it to the 100th of a meter. Like, it is quite literally and beyond impressive that he landed exactly where he broke the first record. Like, that's just absolutely spectacular. And if you get to know Jacob, he's of kind of like an Ella Rochelle mindset. Like, he's not selling for it. He's in the weight room. He's putting in extra effort. He's not just sitting there with shot put, throwing over and over again. He's putting into that fine-tuned work into it. He's a great guy to talk to, a great athlete overall. So kind of like with Ella Rochelle, I think it's a very similar situation to where I wouldn't buy into it to say, okay, that's where they're going to max out. This is it. Because he's already set at 15.17. That's in the indoor elements. We haven't even included the outdoor season where he's set more records than he has in the indoor. So, I mean, over time, we're going to be able to see that foundation be used to not only just get them to where they need it, but step forward. I think Jacob Parker is going to be able to blow that 15.17 spot out of the water.
Right now, currently, the weather outside is looking quite well for us here at Waynesburg with 50-degree temperatures. So that also means on the horizon is that outdoor season. For you, Ethan, it's right now in this indoor season, it's kind of winding down, but it's also winding up for this Waynesburg team. Do you see them slowing down, maybe taking a little bit of a break to do that transition into outdoor, or keep moving at full steam ahead?
Full steam ahead. They still practice 6 days a week. With 3 of those practices traditionally being at 6 a.m., then they practice at 4 p.m. on other nights as well. So they're practicing all throughout the day. The coaching staff, as I've talked about before, is incredibly flexible with making sure as long as you get in and putting in the time and effort and it works around your schedule, we'll be able to make it work. And I mean, clearly that's a recipe for success, because if that wasn't the case, they wouldn't be succeeding as well. And track and field is a team sport, but it's also loosely not as much team sport. It's a little individual as well, because guess what? You have Ella Rochelle, who's breaking program notches, finding herself at top of the PAC. Jacob Parker's atop the PAC. I think as well, some other people that are putting their name into the running for being considered. I mean, for starters, Erin Belieble's cross-country runner, but as a distance runner, she's already 7th place in track and field in her first year as a freshman. Grace Tanksley has put herself, I guess you could say, a tank in this case, in the long distance running. 4th place finish for her. Gabrielle Chico, top 10 in the PAC in women's shot put. And that's just the people that we're seeing on top without really digging too much deep into it. I think all of them have done such a spectacular job of putting in the time and effort to get where they need to be. And now that's going to translate into outdoor season. Because if you're doing this indoor season, outdoor seasons when things really start to pick up and get heavy and the competition picks up. And also, I think what also helps that we don't talk about a lot is they're racing and running and throwing against D1, D2 schools too. This isn't a strictly Division 3 mindset or setup or meet. They're playing Mount Union. They're going at Slippery Rock, WVU. This isn't just we're just running against fellow D3 schools. I think that also may have a little bit of motivation too to think, all right, you know what? Anything you can do, I can do better.
Yeah, I would agree in all those statements. Ethan, thank you very much for joining us here up on the desk. Next, we're going to move over into the hardwoods for some men's and women's basketball. Welcome back into Jacket Sports Weekly. For this segment, we are talking about men's and women's basketball. We're going to start it off on the men's side, and to talk about it is Chase Maceiko up here on the desk. So, for the men, they finally got a win. It's been forever is what it feels like. They finally got a win after 5 straight President's Athletic Conference losses. So, for this, who was the key in this matchup? Was it the ghost of senior day? It's the fact that it was senior day that they won, or was it actually some players that were able to make some plays out on the court?
Yeah, so we're going to start off with a guy who we didn't even know he was going to be walking on senior day, Jackson Rhodes. Nobody knew he was going to be walking on senior day. The roster lists him as a junior, but there he was walking out, and he showed up. 25 points for Jackson Rhodes. He led Waynesburg in scoring, and then there were 5 other players over 10 points. So this Jacket offense was on fire. We haven't really seen them working together like this that much throughout the season. We've seen Jackson Rhodes have these big moments, but usually it's just one guy. Usually it's just Jackson Rhodes. Usually it's just Aiden Blake, maybe Scott Billivis. But they really kind of all united as one force today, or this past weekend. And, Jackson Rhodes led them, but it was really a mesh of all the seniors. Maybe it was some senior day magic, but they really just had a great game overall together as one.
84-82 was that end score against Hiram. But the big thing to look at is that former players of Mikey Smith and Donovan Rakes, who to our accounts left the team last week, then paved the way for Scott Billivis to get a start. Now, many could say that this was because of senior day, him being a senior. That led to him getting a start. However, he was in for a very good amount of time, which is abnormal within senior days. So, does this mean that with the losses of Smith and Rakes, that Billivis continues to get the starting nod?
I think yes to start with. Scott Billivis had started multiple games throughout the beginning of the season. He started games last season. He's been one of the consistent key core members of this Waynesburg basketball team. But I think as it goes along, especially if the trend of losses continues, they're going to look in other directions. Maybe Demetrius Rivers, he didn't play last week. We don't know why. But other guys like Lorenzo Staley, he's a 6'8 freshman. You lost 2 of your rebounders. Maybe he's a guy you look to really step into that rebounding role and start building for the future. But Scott Billivis, you mentioned, he played some solid minutes in the last game, and it's worth it. He shoots 35.9% from the three-point line, and they really needed that in that game. He shoots a ton of threes. He's off and on, but this past weekend he was on. So I think until he really cools down, you're going to stick with Scotty B in your starting 5.
You alluded to it. He had 15 total points. He was 4 for 8 at the three-point line. But earlier in the season, he hasn't been as hot. So Do you think that this is because of luck, or is it just because he's gotten that starting position?
I think it's more of a starting role. You know, these guys, they like consistency. They want to know that they're getting consistent playing time. Gives them a little bit more motivation. So maybe with Mikey and Donovan being gone, maybe Scott's really, you know, putting in some extra effort, and you can see it translate out on the court. You know, he started off the game we mentioned, starting off the season, started for them, and then since the winter break, he really hasn't been a starter except for a couple times. Now he finally has his opportunity again, and he doesn't want to give it away. So I really don't see it being luck. I think he's finally trying to seize that opportunity he has and remain a starter for the rest of the season.
For their continuation of the season, they travel to Bethany on Wednesday, February 11th. In their last matchup that they had against Bethany, it was an 85-77 victory for the Bison. What key movements and necessities need to happen to make this season end on somewhat of a high note?
Yeah, I think you really need to start looking at some of your younger players. If it's Demetrius Rivers, Lorenzo Staley, a couple guys we mentioned, you really want to start building for next season because you're not making the playoffs in this one. And, you know, you can play your seniors. That's all right. They're going to get playing time, but in those second halves of games, if it's really starting to get a struggle, you should be building for the future. You really can't be playing for this team right here, right now, because it's been a struggle. They've proved it's been a struggle with really no light at the end of the tunnel. You got to start looking to the future, looking for a different light at the end of the tunnel, and play some of these younger guys.
That's going to do it all for the men's side. When we move over here into the women's side, they are now on a 5-game winning streak within the President's Athletic Conference, in that their most recent being against Hiram on Senior Day as well, along with Alumni Day. But with those 5 straight wins, they beat the number 1 team within the President's Athletic Conference, at least when the game happened, in the St. Vincent Bearcats. But now they're still 5th in the South Division. If they were in the North, they would be tied for 1st. So that just shows how competitive this South Division can be. Bethany is currently tied for 2nd within in the South Division, and Bethany was also the last team that Waynesburg lost to. This is a crucial game. You need to win this game. However, if you lose it, there is still hope at the end of the tunnel. However, we'll see where that goes. But Bethany is now their opponent on Wednesday. What efforts do the Lady Jays need to do to get this victory?
Yeah, for Waynesburg, it was an 11-point loss last time out versus Bethany. Callista Friday had 22 points. Mia Hankins had 16, 2 really strong totals for Waynesburg. But besides that, it was pretty lackluster. They shot just over 32% from the field, and that wasn't going to cut it against that Bethany team. That Bethany team, last time they played, shot 45.8%, and they had 5 scorers over 10 points. So if you're Waynesburg, you can keep getting it in your playmakers' hands. We always talk about Callista Friday. She's always going to run the offense for you, but getting Mia Hankins involved, Kara McFadden, I don't want this to turn into a 3-point shooting contest. You really got to use the paint a little bit more than they did last game. Get it to Tori Wesolowski, Jules Moorbacher, Clara Page Miller, and work inside the paint. Then it'll open up that 3-point shot and get it to your playmakers, like we mentioned with Callista Friday, Mia Hankins, and Kara McFadden.
You said it before, Callista Friday has continued to be a force of nature within this PAC, and with that has received the President's Athletic Conference Women's Basketball Player of the Week this week. And so for her, and who else can be those key players going into this final stretch looking to make a playoff position?
Yeah, we'll start with Callista. And it's truly remarkable just how impressive she's been this season. She leads the Yellow Jackets in basically every single category, gets 7 rebounds a game. That amazes me with how short she is on the court compared to everybody else. Somehow she's always in the right place at the right time, but she doesn't ball hog it. She leads the team in assists. She really dishes it around, sets up her team any way she can. And she's not a one-dimensional player. She can do it in the paint. She can pull up from 3. She's shooting 44% from the 3-point line. And then when she gets to the line, she's shooting 85%. That's best on the team as well. She can truly do anything. But I think it's the other players we mentioned, Mia Hankins, Kara McFadden. It's amazing how many different shooters this team has. They're not scared to shoot the three, but it's the people that work inside the paint, the other rebounders, Jules Moorbacher, Tori Wesolowski, I really look to. Because if they're consistently getting in the paint, scoring, getting those offensive rebounds when the threes don't land, then this Waynesburg women's team is really going to cruise and be on their way to a victory.
Well, Chase, thank you very much for sitting down with us to talk men's and women's basketball. That's going to do it all for the analyst portion of the episode. Coming up next, we have the top 5 athletes of the week, a brand new segment here on Jacket Sports Weekly. And welcome into a brand new segment here on Jacket Sports Weekly. I'm Joe Chirillo. I will be your host for this segment, and this is pretty much how the theme will go for the remainder of this segment that you'll be seeing hopefully weekly. In this, it is the Waynesburg top 5 athletes of the week chosen by the host for each week. So I will be your inaugural week for this segment. So let's get right into it. At my number 5 position is Jackson Rhodes. 25 total points against Hiram is his new season high and also his new career high. And that was since his week 1 points of 23 total points in their first competition. That also paved the way for their first victory in 7 games. So that earns him our number 5 spot. Going into the number 4 position, Ella Rochelle with a 1:02 in the 400 meters at the Bob Shannon Invitational. That was second in program history and just 3rd in the overall tournament. That was just behind her own record of a 1:0061 time from last season. With that, she also finished 3rd in the event, as said, but she took 5th place as well in long jump with a 4.62 meter in jump. Now over to number 3. Jacob Harker continues to make waves in shot put. He tied his own first place program history, his program record of a 15.17 meter throw. That now puts him at 8 of the top 10 longest throws in shot put indoor track and field history at Waynesburg, and that earns him our number 3 spot. Into number 2, Jesse Orban, who notched his 100th victory of his career at the John Suma Invitational after being 5-0 in the past week, and then also was named the PAC Men's Wrestler of the Week, gets us to number 2. And at our number 1 spot, or I should say my number 1 spot, is Callista Friday. 19 total points against Hiram, 16 total points against St. Vincent, 18 total rebounds over those 2 games, 7 total steals, and continues to make waves to get to a potential 500 total rebounds in this coming week. Then she also was named the PAC Women's Basketball Player of the Week and has been the main leader behind the 5-game winning streak within the PAC for the Lady Jays. That is going to do it for this Athlete of the Week segment and then also this Jacket Sports Weekly episode. We thank you very much for tuning in this week. Make sure to stay tuned for more content on WCTV's YouTube and social media pages. Also, make sure to check out WaynesburgSports.com for the latest in Waynesburg sports. Thank you all very much for joining us this afternoon. Have a great rest of your day, and God bless.
This has been a production of Waynesburg Community Television.